Okay, what we want to do is talk about gross domestic product some more today, quite a bit actually. What we want to do is build a little bit of a model of the economy, kind of a simple model of the economy. And we'll start off with just two sectors in our economy, the household sector and the business sector. Let me put little boxes here and I'll just label those, household sector and business sector. Now the household sector and the business sector are tied together in our economy in two different ways. Here's one way. The household sector supplies factors of production or resources, and let me just kind of draw this deal going this way, where we say resources or factors of production. I'll use both terms sometimes. That is the land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship that businesses require, the resources they require to produce goods and services. Okay? And so there is one link between the household sector and the business sector. The household sector sends those factors of production or those productive resources to the business sector. Guess what happens? The business sector sends money back, and I'll switch over to a different color here to show you the flow of money coming back. Here's the dollars coming back, and these are what? Resource payments. And by the way, what you can kind of think about here is that it's not just like the household sector sending resources off and the business sector sending dollars off. There's really supply and demand taking place in the resource market, and it's supply and demand that determines the price of those resources and the quantity that's hired. Okay? But anyway, so it's supply and demand in this market that determines how many resources get sent, how much revenue or how many dollars come back to the factor of production or the household sector. Okay? Now, that's one link between the household sector and the business sector. The other link is this. The household sector needs goods and services. You know, these people have gone to work, they've gotten paid, but now they need things like a car, a house, groceries, and so forth. And so the other part of the story is the household sector sends away dollars, the dollars they received just a moment ago. They send away dollars, and these dollars are called expenditures. And receive in return goods and services. And the household sector meets the business sector in this market for goods and services, and I'll again draw supply and demand, and there's where prices get determined and quantities and so forth. And this is a goods market. Or goods and services market. By the way, this diagram is generally referred to as the circular flow model. Of the economy. And you can see the circular flow there. This is all interrelated. You know, if something happened like, let's say everybody in the household sector just said, we're not going to spend that money anymore, we're not going to buy goods and services. If they stopped doing that, then there'd be no more dollars flowing into businesses. And then if there were no more dollars flowing into businesses, businesses couldn't keep on paying their workers and so forth. That would bring a stop to this flow of funds too, the resource payments. And vice versa. If businesses started, or stopped, I should say, buying resources from households and just said, we're not going to pay you guys anymore, we'll hire workers from other countries or send all of our manufacturing to be done overseas. If the resources payments stopped flowing into households, households wouldn't be able to continue buying goods and services by sending dollars to the business sector. They'd just say, we can't afford to buy anything. And then that would be the end of that story. This circular flow shows that businesses and households are tied together in a very intimate way, and there's no sort of escaping the other one. They have to do business with each other. Okay? We've got a couple things that we want to, or points that we want to make here. Let me make the one point, and it's this. Here's the value of production. Where are we here? Let's see the best place to label this. This is these dollars that we're looking at here, expenditures. This is the dollar value of production. That is to say, the goods are coming from the business sector. That's production is occurring here, production. Production occurs there, and the goods come over to the household sector, and then the household sector has to hand money over. And that money that the household sector is handing over, that's the value of production. This thing over here, goods and services, this really is what corresponds to what I would call real, gross, domestic product. This flow of dollars up here, I would call total income of, let's say factors of production, factors. I'll just say total income of factors. And so the lesson that we want to see here is what? The value of production equals gross domestic product equals total factor income. So what we have really, and we can see it in this diagram, is that we have several different measures of macroeconomic activity. We can measure macroeconomic activity by standing over here and watching the goods and services come out of the business sector and head on their way to the market. Or we could measure the value of economic activity by standing over here and watching the dollars come out of the household sector and being spent. Or we could stand over here and watch the businesses send dollars out to the factors of production. We can measure those dollars, and we would have a measure of macroeconomic activity. There are several different measures of economic activity that we can rely on, or that we can observe and think about and talk about and so forth. Okay, so that's one point we want to make. Here's a second point. We want to understand the idea of leakages and injections into the circular flow. That's one word, into. It's nothing to sneeze at. Let's think about a leakage here. Suppose something like this happens. Let me see where I'll put this in. Suppose something like this happens. The household sector, they've got their resource payments coming in. This is their income, right? This same thing as household income. Coming from the resource payments from businesses appear to the households as, hey, there's some income coming in. That's your paycheck, and that's the interest you receive from the bank, or that's the dividends you get from the corporation, or so forth. But anyway, so here comes this income, and what we've assumed right here is that those dollars just go through the household and get spent. Suppose something like this happens, though. Suppose a household income, we'll say, is $100, and suppose that expenditures are equal to $80, and that the household takes $20 over here, 20, and puts that into saving. Saving. So the next time around, I mean, there were $100 that left the businesses. They sent $100 to the household sector. And the household sector a minute ago would spend that $100, and here it'd come back to businesses. But now we have something that we're going to call a leakage. There's a leakage from the circular flow. And what happens is some of those dollars might leave the circular flow and not come back to businesses. And so the next time around, businesses just have $80 coming in. And if businesses just have $80 coming in, they're saying, wow, we're not selling very much, you know. We were selling $100 worth of goods and services. Now we're only selling $80 worth of goods and services. And then what they'll say is, you know, we better cut back on our production. Right? And when they say we better cut back on production, then what they say is we don't need so many factors of production or resources anymore, and so we don't need to hire $100 worth of workers anymore, workers and capital and so forth. We just don't need $100. And so the point is this number would start going down. Maybe it would go down to 80. And I don't really want to go and trace through all the particular effects of what this might do. But the point is, as soon as we had this leakage coming out of the circular flow, and those dollars don't keep just spinning round and round here, as soon as that happens, then we start running into problems of the business sector making these resource payments. And if they do, let's go back to my possibility here. Let's say this goes down from $100 to $80. Then the next time around, the household sector says we only have $80 in income. And so now what's going to go around? Well, they might say in the next time period, let's save 60 or 15, and let's spend only, what, 80 minus 15, 65. This would go down again. The point is that we've got these leakages that can occur. Again, the specific dollar amounts are not what we're trying to understand here, only to see that if somebody changes their behavior, we've got our circular flow, and what we see, I want to get my fingers here intertwined because this is really, I mean, these two sectors are dealing with each other in two different markets, and you can't just do something in one of these markets and pretend that has no other effects. If something happens in the goods market where dollars are drained off, and by the way, that's not the only place they could go is into saving. What about this? What if the dollars, $80 go to expenditures on goods produced by U.S. businesses, but what if $20 goes out of the country to purchase imports from overseas? $20. It's another leakage. So what we want to see is the relationship between these two sectors. If one of the sectors decides to do something like what we see right here, dollars leave the circular flow, and that affects then the next time around. Okay, this is a very simple model. We'll get into more complex models later on, more sophisticated diagrams, mathematics, and so forth. But really, what all that will refer to, those other models, those other theories that we're working with, all those refer to is this kind of a picture. And this is a pretty powerful picture, even though it's real simple. That's what makes it powerful, is it's simple, and yet it tells a lot of different stories. But this is a pretty powerful model, and if you kind of, maybe you get lost later on looking at some of these theories, how the economy works, you can kind of come back to here and reorient yourself. Okay? So anyway, now, I'm going to go back and have this as saving, where the money just doesn't get spent. Now, is that the end of the story? And the answer is not necessarily. How about this? Something like this could happen, and we haven't drawn this diagram before, but let's introduce the idea of a credit market. So here's the quantity of credit, And here's the price of credit on the vertical axis. The price of credit is the interest rate. And by the way, before we draw that, if you say there is no credit market, and that's the case in less developed countries, and it was the case in the United States back in, what, 1800, there were some credit markets, but not very advanced ones, not very effective ones. And so what would happen, and we've heard these stories about putting money in your mattress or putting it in a can and burying it in a backyard. Where do you think those stories come from? And the answer is, somebody actually used to do that. And so if what happens is the household sector says, well, I'm going to save, out of this $100, I'm going to save 20. And let's suppose what they do is they go out and they get a can, dig a hole in the backyard, put $20 in the can, cover the hole up, cover the can up, and just leave that saving there for now. Then that's the end of that $20. We've had a leakage. And there's no and what happens next. Nothing happens next. The money's just gone. It's in the backyard. Someday it may be spent again, but not today. So anyway, but what if we have credit markets? If you have credit markets, and I mean by that like banks and mutual fund companies and so forth, if we have credit markets, then something like this happens. There's a supply and demand for credit. And this saving becomes a supply of credit. You put the money in your bank. You've got this saving, you earned $100, you put $20 in the bank in your savings account, and the banker then says, hey, I'm going to make loans. You know, that customer gave me $20, I'm going to lend that out. And so when the banker starts lending it out, it determines a certain interest rate. And there's not just a supply of credit, there's also a demand for credit. There's also borrowing that takes place. And so that $20 that was saved and was a leakage from the circular flow, and left the economy and sort of deflated it, now that $20 gets borrowed. It's as though somebody goes out in the backyard and digs up that can and says, I have your $20. And then they, which is about what would happen to me if I put that money in a can in my backyard. And so what happens is whoever borrows that money, it could be other people in the household, but it could be businesses. Let's pretend that it's businesses. Businesses would take that money, they would borrow it. This is going to be a long ways around here. But the dollars themselves would come to businesses. Here's credit. Why would businesses borrow? Maybe they want to build a new factory, a $20 factory. They want to build a new factory, and so businesses borrow, and here's that credit going to them. And then what they do is the businesses that borrow that $20, they spend the $20, purchase capital goods. That is to say, whoever did this borrowing, borrow $20, whoever did the borrowing, they've got that $20, and now they spend it and purchase some capital equipment from another company. For example, General Motors borrows the $20 and uses that to, let's say, put some new device in their cars, something that monitors the emissions and so forth and corrects pollution and does those things. Well, who are they going to spend that money with? Maybe some other company that makes semiconductors or makes certain parts that go in car engines that makes them pollute less. So anyway, what I'm saying to you is that this $20 that left the economy a moment ago as a leakage has now become an injection. These dollars are being injected back into the circular flow. Now that the businesses some businesses spending $20 to purchase capital goods, then there's $80 coming into businesses from selling to the household sector, and there's $20 coming into businesses selling to other businesses. It could have worked out differently. Maybe the $20 was borrowed instead by the household sector. Let me just kind of take this out for now. Maybe instead what happened was other people in the household borrowed that $20. So here goes the credit of the $20 that's borrowed in the credit markets, down at the bank, for example. And so now there's $20 coming in that the household sector borrowed, and now they will spend $20, and there's 80 plus 20. Now they're spending $100. They're spending the borrowed money plus the $80 they were spending before. Leakages and injections. And so what I'm saying to you is this, is these leakages cause the economy to slow down, and these injections cause the economy to speed up, speed the economy. What's the significance of this? This is really the whole story that we're going to be talking about for the rest of the semester. The rest of the semester, what we're going to have is models of the economy and how certain actions by the Federal Reserve or the government, meaning the Congress and the President and so forth with their spending, but the Federal Reserve's behavior, government's behavior, the foreign sector, imports and exports, all these different parts of the economy, consumption behavior, saving behavior, credit markets, all these things that we've been talking about so far, and that really we could make this a lot more complex picture, but the behavior of each one of these groups, their behavior has the potential of creating leakages that drain dollars out of the circular flow and cause the economy to slow down. But each one of those groups, the household, the business, the Federal Reserve, the government, and the foreign sector, they all have the potential of injecting dollars into the circular flow too, and causing the economy to speed up. Now, so I'm telling you, this is the picture, and it's an ugly picture, isn't it? This is the picture of the economy that we want to have in the back of our mind as we go through the rest of the semester. And really all we're going to do is, we're going to do two things. We're going to try and understand what are the leakages and the injections, you know, more technically, more specifically. I've just glossed over it here today by drawing this, okay, here comes the dollars from credit markets back to the households. Just kind of thrown that in. I showed the possibilities that we would bury some of our savings out in the backyard or import goods from overseas. But what we want to do is come back and be more technically thorough. We want to take up each one of these possibilities in turn. And then what we also want to do is, rather than just go, oh, you know, 20 bucks or 80 bucks or whatever, what we want to be is, we want to be more technically accurate and talk about, now exactly, if $20 gets used in such and such a way, what will be the impact on the economy? Not just to change, you know, these lines that I'm making and change their direction or where they go to, but what is the specific impact on the overall economy? And that's what we're talking about here. Speed up the economy, slow down the economy, by how much? By how much? And that's what we want to answer as we go through the semester, is we want to have more specific measures of these things. I've told you that gross domestic product, I don't know if I did tell you how much gross domestic product is, did I? Let's just look it up. I'm looking in something called the Survey of Current Business. The Survey of Current Business is put out by the U.S. Department of Commerce. This is one of the cabinet level departments. There's a Secretary of Commerce that reports to the President. Now let me go just inside here. In every issue of the Survey of Current Business, there's something, an article at the very front that says, and by the way, this comes out every month, and it's over in the government documents section of the library. But every month, business situation, there's a short article, and here's the table 1. Gross domestic product. So anyway, let's look at this. Gross domestic product is about $8 trillion. So what we want to do is we want to start talking about this $8 trillion. What would make that $8 trillion go up to $8.5 trillion? Or what would that make that $8 trillion go down to $7.5 trillion? And so the point, and I've already made that point, but let me just reiterate, the point is that we don't want to just be drawing these arrows and go, you know what I mean. We want to have something more specific, more accurate in terms of how many dollars are we talking about. What's the size of these impacts that we're saying if there are leakages or if there are injections. By the way, later on when we start drawing some of these other diagrams and looking at the other models, you don't need to draw this because we'll come back to it later, but we'll have all sorts of like complicated diagrams and things like that on the board, and those are actually different diagrams, if you can believe that. They look pretty similar, don't they? Anyway, we'll start drawing several diagrams on the board as the semester goes along. There's another one. Those are the 3, and I haven't even labeled them or anything like that. But we will come back and draw different diagrams to understand different kinds of leakages and different kinds of injections. And then what we will do is we'll be able to show, oh, the impact on gross domestic product is this much, $1 trillion or $1 billion or whatever. And we'll show what sectors of the economy are affected by these various leakages or injections and so forth. So anyway, this is more or less where we're going with all this stuff for the rest of the semester. If we want to, and the first point I made here a while ago was that there are several measures of macroeconomic activity. Gross domestic product is the one that we want to talk about today. I've already talked about gross domestic product quite a bit. We talked about a definition of it, total market value of all final goods and services produced in the economy during a single year. Hey, that was pretty good, huh? Total market value of all final goods and services produced in the economy during a single year. How do we measure that? Two different ways. One, there's something called the expenditure approach. I had this thing up here a while ago that was talking about all the spending for goods and services equal to the value of all production equals all resource payments and so forth. So we can measure gross domestic product by measuring spending. These things, total spending, this is all the dollars that people spend to buy goods and services. Well, this is the value of all goods and services. Here's GDP, value of all goods and services, and all we're saying with this expenditure approach is I can measure GDP by measuring the total dollar value of spending. And this has got to be obvious, doesn't it? The value of everything produced is equal to, and then you sell it, of course, that's equal to what people pay to buy it. So what are the expenditures that we measure? 4, consumption by households. We will talk about each one of these in greater detail here in just a second. Investment spending by businesses. Now, a while ago when I drew my circular flow diagram, we just had those two sectors, the household sector and the business sector. But we want to recognize a couple of other sectors here. You know, the circular flow model, its shortcoming is it's too simple. It doesn't answer our questions. And so we're going to have to add to it. Its strength is that it's so simple that we can kind of get a good picture of how the economy operates. The third one is purchases by government. We didn't have the government sector in this circular flow picture. We could draw it complicated enough to include government, but don't need to. And then the fourth expenditure we want to count, net exports. By the way, before I continue, I'm going to put some letters up here. And you should get used to them because we'll use those letters all semester long. Consumption spending by households, C. Investment spending by businesses, I. Purchases by government, G. Net exports, X. With an N, a subscript N. Net exports. Okay, let's talk about each one of those. Consumption spending by households. There's 3 components of this. There's spending on durable goods. There's spending on non-durable goods. And they're spending on services. What's that mean to you, durable and non-durable goods? Well, you know, like if you get a pair of jeans and they say those are durable, that just means they don't wear out fast, right? Well, that's really what it means right here. Durable goods are goods that do not wear out fast. Non-durable goods are goods that do wear out fast. Now, Again, you know, we used that term a couple weeks ago about inferior goods, and I said don't just use your sort of everyday definition of an inferior good. It's the same thing here with non-durable goods. There are some sort of technical rules whether you put something in the durable or the non-durable category. But in general, here's what we mean by this. Durable goods are goods with a life of 1 year or longer. Durable goods have a life of 1 year or longer. And by the way, some people will say 3 years or longer. We'll say 1 year in this class. But if you go out there, you know, and doing a little bit of research and somebody starts saying 3 years, that's also something people say. Generally speaking, durable goods tend to be big ticket items. And I mean, what lasts for over a year? How about a car, a refrigerator, television, washer and dryer, you know, things like that. Right? And so durable goods, long-lived, tend to be expensive. Non-durable goods, by the way, let me just mention in passing, we really don't include housing here. We do include cars and refrigerators and TV sets and things like that, but we really do not include housing because we put housing down here as investment spending. When you buy a house, it's pretty much the same way as if a company builds a factory. It's going to be there for years and years. That's a long-term investment. So that's why houses I haven't mentioned here as one of the durable goods. Anyway, durable goods, big ticket items, have a long life. Now here's something else about durable goods. If it's time to replace a durable good, usually you can postpone that. Usually you can fix that durable good rather than replacing it. And what I mean is, now every once in a while you just go out and you wrap a car around a tree or something like that and you got to throw it away and that's the end of it. But more likely what happens to cars is this, much more often. A person just says, oh man, I'm sick of this car. I've been driving this thing for 10 years. You know how that feeling you get as you're driving down the road and just sick and tired of your car. Anyway, that's the feeling I get. I've been driving this for 20 years. I need a new car. And then you start to buy a car, but if things aren't going so good, let's say with your job, you start thinking, I don't know if I'm going to have this job in 6 months or 3 months or whatever. I don't know if I can make those payments. I'm going to have to start making, if I buy a new car, I'll have to make payments for the next 48 months. I'm not certain that I can right now. Things haven't been going so great down at work. You know what I think I might do is I might just have the car worked on, spend a couple $100, have it tuned up a little bit, have this or that changed, new tire put on it, and then just go ahead and drive this for another 6 months or a year. Same thing's true, washer or dryer, your refrigerator, your TV. If you start having trouble with durable goods, it's nice to go out and buy a new one, but on the other hand, usually what you can do is have the old one fixed up or repaired or something like that, or maybe not even repair it, just say, yeah, I'm tired of this car, but I'm just going to keep on driving it anyway. It's just that I'm tired of it. It's not that it doesn't work. It's not that it won't get me from point A to point B. So anyway, here's what the significance of that is. Durable goods purchases tend to have this cycle to it. The cycle is people buy a lot of durable goods when they're feeling sort of wealthy and confident about the future and the economy's performing strongly. People go out and buy a lot of durable goods. And the same thing's true not just of durable goods, but also houses, which I said we put into this other category. People tend to buy a lot of houses when they feel like, I can make those payments. I'm feeling good about my job. I just got promoted. My company's got a good product. It's not about to be driven out of the marketplace by a competitor. This is a good time to buy a house, a good time to buy a car, so forth. Refrigerator, TV set. So durable goods tend to go through these cycles. When you're feeling enthusiastic, optimistic, buy more. When things are not doing so good in the economy, buy less. What's the significance of that for us? It's this. Since consumer spending on durables goes through that cycle, then those segments of the economy that produce durable goods, they go through a cycle too. Now let me give you an example. Probably several of you from St. Louis or Kansas City. St. Louis and Kansas City are big cities, and they tend to specialize in durable goods production. Both in Kansas City and in St. Louis, they produce cars. And I mean, a lot of cars. I think Missouri is maybe the third biggest car producing state. It might be fourth, but it's one of the few states that specialize in producing a lot of automobiles. And automobiles are a durable good, expensive durable goods. And so what happens is, since people's expenditures tend to go up and down in these big cycles depending on optimism, then the dollars flowing into St. Louis and Kansas City to buy cars, that goes up and down too. And so what you'll see is the Kansas City and St. Louis economy will go through cycles, matching those cycles of optimism and spending on durable goods. Let's talk about non-durables. Non-durable goods have a short life. Now let me give you a couple of good examples here of non-durable goods. How about dinner, right? Food. Somebody, I don't know, they raise a cow, they slaughter the cow, they make a steak, they put the steak on your plate, you eat the steak, it's gone. So food's a non-durable good. How about the gas that goes into your car? Fuel. That's a non-durable good, right? You put the gas in the car, you start the engine, you go down the road, you burn up the gas, it's gone. Well, not gone, actually, it's up in the air. But the point is it's gone from you, and that's a non-durable good. It has a very short life. How about other things like utilities? You turn up the thermostat in the winter and you turn it down in the summer. But anyway, you're using up electricity or natural gas or whatever, and that's a non-durable good. The pencils and paper that you have in front of you, the clothes that you're wearing, non-durable. Newspapers, non-durable goods. You get the idea. Now, non-durable goods are things that you kind of use them up. You know, you don't go out and buy gasoline to save it for several years. You go out and buy gasoline because you're going to use it. You want to go someplace. And so, boy, 2 days later, it's gone. And if 2 days later it's gone, guess what happens 2 days later? You go out and buy some more. And so this expenditure, and how about dinner? You know, like you eat dinner, it's gone. The next morning it's breakfast, it's time to eat again. After a while that's gone, then it's lunch and time to eat again, then it's dinner, and you know the whole story about the 3 meals a day. And so that non-durable good is something that we're just continuously buying more and more of it. Now, how does that behavior, or how does non-durable spending behave? Not in these big cycles. We don't say this, gosh, I'm feeling optimistic, enthusiastic about the economy. I'm feeling pretty good about my job, so I'll eat dinner tonight. We don't say that. We're going to eat dinner every night. If your job's going great, you eat dinner. If your job's not doing so great, you eat dinner. Same thing about putting gas in the car. Right? And so what happens with non-durable goods, we don't have this, these swings or this cycle between optimism and pessimism. We have just sort of slow and steady growth. People, every year the population goes up a little bit. Every year people can afford a little bit more gas, a little bit more of this, a little bit more of that. And so what we have for the non-durable goods, let me do a graph here for each one of these. I'm saying that over time, the durable goods spending, I'll just put dollars there, tends to go through cycles, but non-durable goods spending through time tends to just sort of, you know, go up. And let me draw that a little flatter. It doesn't go up rapidly. It's more of a slow growth. And there are the little dips and the little pickups, but they're minor. Something would happen like, let's say there's a snowstorm and so on the East Coast, and so people don't drive very much that month, you know, in the snow. And since they're not driving quite so much, they don't use quite so much gasoline. And so there'd be a little bit of a down month for purchasing non-durable goods. But that's not a big deal. It would just show up as a slight little ripple. No big cycle. Okay? Now, I told you St. Louis and Kansas City, among other cities, Detroit, Chicago, and so forth. But big cities tend to be places where they produce a lot of durable goods. But smaller cities and towns, they tend to do more non-durable goods production. Now, why is that? Well, there are several reasons, but I'll give you a simple one. With durable goods production, there are these big ticket items. They tend to be produced in big factories. Like you've probably seen the Chrysler plant up in St. Louis or a Ford plant up in Kansas City or something like that. When they're manufacturing cars, what they have is a huge factory, and they have tens of thousands of workers sometimes in these big factories, but certainly thousands and thousands, all in one place producing cars. Well, you know, if General Motors would move to Springfield and open up a factory and say, okay, we're going to produce cars, and they put out the sign that says help wanted, would thousands of people show up to get a job at General Motors? And the answer is no. There aren't thousands of people in Springfield looking for work. We simply have too small of a labor force. And Springfield's sort of a medium-sized town. What about a smaller town? You know, these that sort of surround Springfield here for 100 miles in any direction. What if General Motors showed up in one of those towns, you know, population 2,000, and said, we want to hire 5,000 people for our factory? Just couldn't do it. And so if you're going to be producing these big-ticket durable goods, which tend to be produced in large volumes and big factories, you need to go where the labor is, and the labor is in big cities. It's this way the world over. Non-durable goods, that tends to be something that we can produce very often in smaller quantities, in smaller locations. And so, anyway, we tend to see non-durable goods production in smaller towns. Here's the news about that. Whereas St. Louis and Kansas City may go through its cycles, then smaller towns that are focused on producing smaller things, they tend not to have so many economic cycles, or the cycles tend not to be so pronounced. You know, you might just have a small farming community that's growing food. A lot of milk, a lot of beef, a lot of pork, a lot of chickens, and maybe that's it in that small town. And what happens is people are eating the pork and the beef and drinking the milk and so forth daily. And so that small town doesn't go through the cycles. Let's talk about services. Let me just draw the graph before we go any further, and then I won't have to come over and do this again in a second. Services sort of looks the same way as non-durable goods. That is to say, spending on services. It tends to go up more or less at a slow rate, but not going through big cycles. What kind of services are we talking about? Well, how about a haircut? How about having your clothes dry cleaned? Again, these are things that don't go through big cycles. You're thinking, oh, I need to get a haircut. My hair is getting shaggy. And we don't go, well, things aren't looking good down at the office right now. I'm not sure if I'm going to get that raise I've been counting on. I better not get a haircut. They don't say that. They say, oh, a haircut, you know, $5, $10, whatever. Just go get the haircut. Dry cleaning, yeah, I've got something to take to the dry cleaners. This is not something you can really postpone, you know, the haircut or the dry cleaners or whatever. These are things that you need to just sort of go on a day-to-day basis, and most people do. And that being the case, and also the amount of money involved is pretty small, and so people don't really try and postpone that. The way they might say, things are tight right now, I think I won't buy that car, and since I'm not buying the car, that's going to save me $5,000 a year, and so I can go on buying my non-durable goods and buying services just like I always would. The service economy has been growing more rapidly than the manufacturing, and I didn't really write that term up here, but these are both tangible goods, and so the process of producing those is called manufacturing. But with services, there's no manufacturing process. By the way, I didn't mention it, but another thing that makes services smoother and not go through the cycle is you can't store them. Right? It's like, and let me go back to the example of cars. What could happen is General Motors, Ford, Chrysler, these companies could produce a lot of cars and then just put them like out behind a big fence and hold them in inventory. And then sell them out next year or next month or whatever. But there's a possibility of storage, so you can produce a lot this month and then produce nothing next month. And so we have a little bit of a cycle there. But with services, it's not like barbers can go out and produce 1,000 haircuts and put them in a box and hold on to them and then send all the barbers home for a couple months and then just sell the haircuts out of that box. Can't do it. So there's no storage. Anyway, what I started to say is the service part of the economy for the last really all of this century, the service economy has been growing more rapidly than the manufacturing part of the economy. More and more things turn towards services and fewer towards manufacturing. Okay, let's put some numbers on these and then we'll close for the day. Total gross domestic product, no, that's not what I want to talk about. I want to talk about total consumption spending by households. Recently, and this is not like today's value, but these are pretty close. Total spending is about 5.2. I won't put it as trillion dollars, I'll put it in billions. 5,200 billion. And out of that 5,200 billion, what we have is durable goods, 730 billion. Non-durable goods, $1550 billion. Hope I'm getting these right. And then services, $29.05 billion. Now, maybe because I was rounding off, they don't add up exactly, but it should be that they do, that these things right here, do they? 3, 4, 5, yeah, I think they do. I think they do. That is basically the distribution of that 52 or the $5 trillion. Services are by far the biggest part of the economy. That's where we'll stop for the day. We'll pick up with this next time. So long.